Welcome to Practical Psychology Podcast, episode 16. I'm Joseph, one of the co hosts. Today, I'm very happy to welcome Silvia here. Silvia is the founder of Pluma Translations and Community, a thriving Vancouver company that offers official translations, English lessons, and psychological and practical support to newcomers, as well as regular social events. Silvia has a long career in translation. She is currently the president of the Translation Certification Body in Canada, CTTIC, as well as the provincial BC Association, STIBC. Silvia studies psychology and neurology in mental health, and particularly interested in becoming a researcher, specializing in psychosis, hallucination, and willpower. Very different topics here initially. But then eventually she decided to pursue a career in counseling and psychotherapy. Sylvia has a long career with newcomers, especially refugees. This is her current focus of her counseling and her passion. Sylvia offers trauma-specific therapy and support the newcomers to build a new life in Canada. Welcome, Sylvia.
Mhm. Thank you so much for having me here, Joseph, and thank you very much for this opportunity. I really appreciate it.
So Sylvia, let's talk a little bit about how does your background leads you to psychotherapy first?
Well, this is very interesting. I've always had this two streams going around. Like I always, when I was 6 years old, I already said I wanted to become a psychologist. Someone explained to me what a psychologist was. So I was the person who talks to people and gives you psychological support. And I said to my family, I want to become a psychologist. 6 years old, I had this idea. And then I ended up in my 20s having children very young. And even though I wanted to pursue an academic career, maybe become a university professor or something like that, but I found with my two little kids and my husband at the time, we were just moving all around the world. We ended up living in different countries, and it just wasn't possible to prioritize my career at that point. So I kind of started doing translation on the side. And I always thought of it as a thing
Mm.
that I would do on the side, and that I would dedicate myself to psychology, psychological research, and stuff like that. But I'm just the kind of person who really gets into things. When I get into something, I really get into it. So I ended up having a very long and interesting career in translation as well. And finally, at this point of my life with my company and everything, I feel like in a way, everything is coming together a little bit in this sort of newcomer support services kind of business that I've developed.
Sylvia, tell me a little bit about how do you go from translation to become the president of the Canadian and the Provincial Association of Translation?
Yeah, okay. So this is a very interesting story. I told it in a different podcast very recently, and I hadn't really shared it before. So back in 2012, I was just pursuing a career in translation, and I took a certification exam. And I failed, and I felt like the fail was very unfair. And I decided I was going to improve the exam system, not just for myself but for everybody. And then fast forward 12, 13 years, and I think it was like a week ago, I became the president of CTTIC, which is the certification body, after having been
Mhm.
very involved with development of exams. So I think this is an interesting example of how having a bad experience, but if you focus it in the right way, it can actually lead you down a path you never thought you would go down. And obviously in the middle of that, it's not just been about this exams. I've met wonderful people. I've seen wonderful things that could be done in BC and on a national level. We just had a huge conference happening in Calgary a couple of weeks ago. I just love the possibilities and what I see. It's like going along the path and you see what you have to do. And that's how it happened. Yeah.
So Sylvia, when listening to you, it's not just doing translation as a job. You are a creator. You like to create things and create changes and bigger things.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, in my company, Pluma Translations, every time someone comes to our office, we have an office in Vancouver, we take a video of them and we ask them what's their superpower. And so we have
Okay.
a big collection of people's superpowers. And then I was thinking about my superpower, right? Like in the context of this, and I'm like, and I thought about different things. I was like, no, kind of like you said, I was like, my superpower is imagining things and making them come true. I think that's like the essence of like just imagining
Mm,
something that doesn't exist yet and be like, this should exist, and kind of like going through the path that it takes, that sometimes is longer than you think, but you can get.
mm.
Yeah.
The concept of superpower is very interesting because you actually encourage people to discover it. And a lot of people don't even think about this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so important. I think everyone has a superpower, and even just thinking about what it is that you are really, really good at, what you have to offer to the world is such a good exercise. And I just love
Mm,
I love my clips, and I love the feeling that I get when I see people and we take their videos and they have said what their superpower is. I feel like
mm.
then they kind of absorb it in a different way when they think about it explicitly.
Oh yeah, Silvia, tell us more about the Pluma society that you created. What is the
Mhm.
meaning of Pluma?
Okay, so Pluma just means pen, like one of those old-fashioned pens, because I've always really
Okay,
been into writing as well,
okay.
and like kind of translation, writing, all of that. That's how it kind of got started. And Pluma used to be just me as a freelance translator, as many of us are. But I'm also the kind of person who really builds connections with people like lawyers, and whatever clients I have or whatever, in the end we build good connections. And so I found
Mm,
over the years, it didn't happen overnight, but over some years my client base really was getting to the point where I couldn't manage it by myself,
yeah.
the work I had. And then I had the choice of, okay, I'm going to take less work, which would have been an okay option, or I'm going to sort of get employees and this is going to be bigger. And
Mm,
slowly we started building on that. We got a physical office. I got my first assistant. Then we involved other people, and everything else. And then we started
okay.
seeing that people needed more than official translations and translation for their immigration processes. We started seeing that English was a huge barrier for so many newcomers. And then we started doing
Mm,
English lessons. And then, by some extremely weird coincidence, two of my employees were psychologists back in Colombia.
okay,
And they
yeah.
were here. And unfortunately, it takes a while to learn English to get to the point where you can register and do everything else. And but like, we started also offering psychological support. And I mean, they're absolutely wonderful. And I'm also, I really hope that they will be able to become registered and like get a license and everything else. But in the meantime, we do a lot of stuff here in terms of psychological support and fun. We also do a lot of social activities as well.
Okay, wow. So going back to that connections, because at
Mhm.
that time you're doing translation to the client,
Mhm.
and you mentioned you have this talent to connect all the resources here. Because we all know in psychotherapy and counseling, change requires a village rather than isolation.
Mhm.
So this is very powerful here, Sylvia.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I think there's very little, there's not that much a person can do on their own. There's some stuff, but I think getting people on board and
Yeah.
kind of earning their trust, their enthusiasm, that's what it's all about. That's how anything kind of a little bit bigger gets done, I find.
Right. Sylvia, tell us a little bit about the clientele that you're working in translation, because I know from a little bit you're working with clients that touch on multiple levels of difficulty and socioeconomic challenges, not just one.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I was mentioning earlier, I have some like very close relationships with some refugee lawyers here in BC,
Mm, mm,
and especially with one of them who does many cases. And I've worked with her
mm,
many years. She's one of the
mm,
best lawyers we have. So I'm very happy to have been a part of her team. And I would, we would work together, and I would do both the interpretation part. So we would prepare the refugee case together, which I learned a lot about the refugee
mm,
processes that way. And then it would come with like a package of translations as well that
mm,
they need to present to the refugee board. So that was a lot of the work that I used to do. Now that I'm doing counseling, I have less time to do interpreting, but I still do a lot of translation. And this refugee theme has kind of happened to me. It's not something that I particularly was looking for, but the same as the translation, it just came into my life and I started to see like different aspects of it. And now I can really say that I've seen it from many different sides for sure.
Okay, wow. So Silvia, tell us a little bit about at the very, very beginning when you first started working with refugees population. What are some of the things that you find out? Oh, I thought it is, but actually it is not. Some of the myth for yourself.
There were a lot of surprises. First of all, whatever stereotypes we might have of people who, I mean, I'm talking about Spanish-speaking refugees, especially. We have quite a few from Colombia, from Mexico, sometimes from Cuba, other countries.
Mhm.
First thing is they're very different from each other. So if you have
Yeah,
a
okay.
sense that you understand what a refugee is like, really not. People are very different. They come from very different situations. Um, some of them are. What is a little bit sad is that I have found many refugees and newcomers in general who had like a very good career and very high expectations for their professional life in their countries. But when they come here to Canada and they maybe join a community of people where there can be a little bit of kind of like a culture of like, oh, you're not going to get anywhere in Canada. It's very difficult to learn English. Here, you're just going to
Mhm.
be a taxi driver or working construction. And some people kind of lose a little bit, their sense of hope, or that they kind of like assume that it is that way, that in Canada they're just going
Mhm.
to have to accept that there are different social status, different professional status. And honestly, one of the things about my company, Pluma Translations and Community, is about raising those expectations again and saying, maybe you do need to work on your English. Maybe you do need some information that you don't have, and you need to understand the Canadian society a little bit better. But you
Mm.
can thrive here if you have a growth sort of attitude. It can happen here for you as well.
Wow, growth attitude. Yes, because Sylvia, you mentioned about a lot of the refugees when they come or newcomers in general.
Mhm.
There's a narrative of you coming here to struggle, as in other people, but you're teaching them how to have a growth mindset to break out of this stigma.
Yeah, absolutely. And now when I've been doing counseling with refugees as well, it's very interesting because they really, really appreciate you bringing that back into their lives in some way, or in even to their
Right.
attention, right? Because a lot of the time you think, okay, refugees, they've come from a traumatic situation. This is very, very real. Like,
Mm.
and there is often a lot of trauma that does need to be processed. But I think the second element is like, okay, what are you going to do with your life now? What now that you're not in danger anymore?
Mm.
What's next? And I feel like people really react very well to having that reminder that something is coming next and this is a new life that's starting.
Yeah. So Sylvia, you in a way you are helping people with their trauma and other symptoms. On the
Mhm.
other hand, you also remind them the growth and the superpower.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so their story won't be just a trauma recovery story. Their story is the story that they can create for themselves.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I always say to them that sometimes, it's not just about getting back to normal. Yes, we want to get back to normal, but it's like a new normal. It's like something has been gained through having gone through that experience, and a new world
Mhm.
has opened up with different possibilities for a lot of people. So it's not just, I'm getting back to zero. It's like I'm getting back to a new place as well.
Yeah, and Sylvia here in Pluma, your own organization here, how do you encourage that community building for the clients when they come in as a single client to get in touch with the larger community?
Yeah, I think that's where the social events, for example, are extremely popular and they're
Ah,
really fun. We all love them. I think it begins with having the right people at the office here. And then,
okay,
I was telling you about my employees who are who
okay,
are psychologists in Colombia. I'm so lucky to have them, and they're
yeah.
so warm that everyone who comes here, I know people just like to hang out at my office because like the atmosphere that we create is like an atmosphere of we treat everyone like friends. And
Okay.
we because that's another thing with newcomers, right? A lot of the time they feel like they don't find the same warmth that they felt in their
Mm,
countries, the same sense of
mhm.
community. They feel like Canadians are maybe different, that they
Oh,
are never going to fit in completely. And so when they come here and we speak, mostly we deal with Spanish speakers. So when we speak in Spanish to them and they see that I'm from Spain and then there's Colombians and we're all very warm people here,
yeah.
I think that encourages them to kind of start to think, okay, maybe I can have a little community here as well, and and have my emotional support, meet people, all of that.
Okay. And Sylvia here, I also saw on your website you organize some social events outside of the office. Tell us more about it.
Oh yeah, yeah, we do like a lot of the time. So for instance, sometimes tomorrow, I think we have a this is in the office, it's like games night. It's like
Okay.
kind of like to learn English. We just play games like Mafia and stuff like that. It's super fun. And sometimes we will like go out either for a cheesecake or for dinner or just stuff like that. One of my
Okay.
employees wants to have a speed friending event that we're
Yeah.
planning so people can just talk to another person for a few minutes and see if they connect just friends. But yeah, we
Wow.
do a lot of stuff like that.
And that's very powerful in your office in Vancouver.
Yeah, yeah. Some stuff we do at the office. Sometimes if we have like a big event, we'll just go
Okay.
to a restaurant or some other place.
So how many staff and volunteers do you have in your office at any given time?
Yeah, so like on a busy day, we might have 4 or 5 people pottering around here, but it depends. I have Nestor, who's like my absolute rock, my sort of executive assistant, does absolutely everything, knows way more about my life than I do, and he's like the closest person here, and he's the one that most people will know. And then we have Alex, Melissa, and we have a lot of people that we work with all the time. So that's
Okay.
lawyers. We have someone who comes to teach English lessons. We have,
Okay.
a bunch of people who are like maybe one step removed, but they're still close, work very closely with us.
Oh, I see. Okay. And the clients can just drop in and have these events and services.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are trying to grow like as kind of there are good services like in Vancouver. There are the companies or
Mhm.
organizations like Mosaic, for example, who do provide very good services for newcomers. But we
Mhm.
want to add something a little bit different, kind of like the social, emotional aspect rather than
Yeah.
just practical services. We want to be there more like, yeah, emotional, making friends, building
Yeah.
social life, that kind of thing. That's our thing right now.
It's very interesting here too, Sylvia, because you talk about other organizations providing the services, and especially if you are applying for a grant or money from the government, usually they focus on the service delivery, but they
Mhm.
don't focus on the human connections aspect of the
Mhm.
funding here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think that's what we kind of have to add to this kind of newcomer
Yeah.
landscape for sure. I feel like that's our thing. That I think everything is important and
Mhm.
everything has its place, but we feel like that's our place. That's our special thing.
Hey, so Sylvia here in Vancouver, because the Vancouver Foundation has done a big research before, finding loneliness is one of the biggest problems facing Canada and Vancouver population here, isolation and all that here. And you are supporting refugees and newcomers in the Spanish culture. Generally speaking, people think about they're more social compared to Vancouver here. What is
Yeah.
your takeaway in that?
No, that's absolutely true. And we sometimes we also have a podcast that we have, and a lot of the people we interview, they always say that
Yeah.
they, as newcomers, they have at least gone through a phase where they felt exactly that way. They came to Canada maybe with high expectations, not only refugees but economic
Mm.
immigrants and everything. And then at some point they're just disappointed with like how people are less social. They don't have the same feeling that they are at ease and at home. When they go to places, they don't know as many people. And
Yeah.
so that's a constant theme. And my answer to that is, first of all, I personally love Canadian culture, and it's like, and I have so many Canadian friends, and I don't necessarily find that myself in the same way that other people say it. But for people who feel that way, we can have our Spanish speaking communities as well. I mean, at the end of the day, how many people do you interact with, like, that you're close to? Maybe 10, 20 people. So if you can have that collection of people in your life, I think you're
Mm,
gonna feel good regardless of how you perceive wider Canadian culture.
yeah, and that's what you are trying to do that in your organization.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes, absolutely. And then we have like the Spanish, we have a huge Spanish community like here in BC, mostly a lot of people from Colombia, a lot of people from Mexico. And we just
Okay.
think there are enough of us to have a little bit of a Latin culture going here as well.
Okay. And looking forward here, because Sylvia, you're very good at identifying the needs and to provide that needs in a very unique way. And what are other needs you see that organization can do better or do more?
Yeah, I think we definitely need to do more work. I think unfortunately I've been talking about the positive side and how everything is good, but I feel like a lot of the time newcomers and especially refugees don't have the same chances as
Mm,
everyone else. A lot of the time there is a lot of lack of information that would be useful to them. A
mm,
lot of people come here kind of thinking, oh, we can't, for instance, just to give you like an example, is like some people might have a lawyer or an immigration consultant who's taking their case who's not doing a good job, and people don't
mm,
feel like they can ask for anything. They don't understand their rights. They don't understand how things
mm.
should be. And I think it can be a little
Yeah.
bit of a lottery for refugees, whether they end up having amazing
Mm,
services or they end up, kind of like not really fitting in the system. So I think
yeah.
information is very crucial, and I think information in other languages is
Mm,
very crucial. Interpretation is very crucial. People should be able to express themselves in their own language.
mm,
I think one thing that we don't talk about enough is how difficult it is to fully participate in society if you don't speak the language like really well. Even if you get by, but until you speak really well, you're going to be a second class citizen
mm.
one way or another.
And Sylvia, you mentioned about people coming here not knowing the things here. It almost sounds like same as a lot of people go to different places. They need a local guide or local mentor.
Mm-hmm.
And also
Yeah.
this concept is not very well established either to be able to navigate services, the culture, new environment, even like taking the public transit,
Mm-hmm.
applying for your BC ID, and these some very basic. If people knew, they don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very practical things like, can they, like you said, can they get a license here, and what do you need and how does it
Mm,
work? And yeah.
yeah,
And I think sometimes people talk to each other, but it also depends what kind of personality you have. Because let's say
yeah,
you have some kind of trauma behind you, you're very introverted, you don't get to know the community that speaks your language, then you can really have a lot of lack of information. And I think,
yeah.
yeah, I think the government and institutions could do a lot more in terms of making sure that these people have a place that they can actually ask
Mm.
questions and get some guidance and everything else. Yeah.
It looks like here goes along the line of civic education or more sort of education so people know even this exists
Yeah.
rather than trial and error. They do it on their own.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and that's one of the things that, we don't do maybe that much, but that's one of the things that Pluma also tries to do is just be a place where
Yeah,
we've been, we don't do it consistently, but we've been toying with this idea of having open hours. So like, let's say from 2 to 3 or
yeah,
something, having people just come in and ask us a question about anything to do with that,
yeah,
how do you take the train? How do you get your license? Where do you get mental health support or whatever? And we can't do everything ourselves, but we kind of feel like we have
yeah.
enough of a knowledge base to at least point people in the right direction.
Okay. So Sylvia, for you yourself in your clinic, do you guys ever do any AMA, Ask Me Anything, Reddit or podcast or anything?
We have a podcast. We have
Oh
a
yeah.
podcast, and we kind of like, we were like, we're just going to get started. You know how you can think about like having a podcast and what's the theme going to be? We're like, we're just doing
Yeah.
it, and we're interviewing people we know. And what the podcast ended up really being about is about like immigrants who have been very successful in Canada. And a lot of the
Okay.
episodes that we do are unfortunately in Spanish for those of people who don't speak Spanish, not as accessible. But like, we're just interviewing people who have done amazing here. And again, it's like raising the expectations. And I wish we did a lot more like promotion
Okay.
stuff, but it's like there's just so much stuff to do that sometimes we're just happy to get through our normal work. But
Okay.
if it were up to
Wow.
me, I would just be doing podcasts like all day long because I love like talking, communicating, and everything like that. But unfortunately, sometimes we do have to
Um,
do like more operations kind of work and focus on that.
oh yeah. Well, I guess nowadays for the video they have the caption, so for the English speaking audience, they can also watch it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And we do have a few episodes in English, but just because of our connections to the Spanish speaking community, we end up kind of
Okay.
knowing a lot more people in the Spanish speaking community. But in principle, it's like Pluma and everything, it's for everyone. It's not about speaking Spanish, it's just the people we
Mhm.
know and how things have been so far.
Yeah. And so Sylvia, tell us a little bit about when you started Puma here. When did you start it?
I started in my bedroom one day with a couple of my friends. What should we call my freelancing company? That was
Yeah,
like, and then we
okay.
were like, we had a few ideas, and Pluma was pen. I liked it best. I'm like, it's called Pluma. But it's been such a long time and it's so different now. And at some point, I
Yeah.
literally now I have an office like in a relatively central location. But at some
Yeah.
point, I had two employees working out of a room in my house.
Okay, yeah,
this is
okay,
this is how it
yeah.
was. We had like a room and a desk,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that's
Oh.
what Pluma was at that time. And we have been growing kind of organically. And when you look back, it's been a lot. It's also been many
Mm.
years. So yeah.
And throughout that process here, Sylvia, because a
Mhm.
lot of the audience who watch this, they might be a psychologist, psychotherapist, counselor, they all might be an entrepreneur, they might be some social changer, or maybe a student with big dreams.
Mhm.
So as you as one of the role model as an entrepreneur here, what are some of the things of hiccups that you have to kind of overcome or learn new things in this business development journey?
I think your enthusiasm for what you want to achieve has to be very strong. And I think it's worth working on that and getting to the vision of something that really aligns with your values and
Mm,
everything else, because otherwise you're going to get tired. And there are a lot of hurdles along the way. And what I would say
mm,
to people is just because things are going wrong or are not working first time, second time, third time, it doesn't mean that it's not going to work in the end. I think one of my favorite
yeah.
quotes, if I can have a quote, is the obstacle is the way, right? So that means that sometimes you encounter a problem and that's the obstacle
Mm,
and you think that's the
wow.
end of the road. But no, I think a lot of the time, if you can actually navigate that successfully, it will lead you in a slightly different direction. And that is the right direction. So that's why it's the obstacle is the way. You haven't lost your way. This is still part of the way.
Mm. So Sylvia, give us one example here about one thing you try. It doesn't work multiple times and it worked eventually.
Well, I guess one of my biggest hurdles starting out was getting my first employee because I had tried so many different times to kind of work together with somebody. Like I had tried at least 7 different times. So my friend, why don't you do this for me and I'll pay you through PayPal and you do this number of hours? And it always seemed to fizzle out or didn't work, or your friend didn't perform the way you wanted, or anything else. And it gets to the point where you think to yourself, this is never going to work. I'm never going to have an employee. And then one day, but I didn't. so many translators, and that's fine because we all have our own dreams and the way we want our lives to be. But when they get too much work, they just say, okay, I'm turning it down, or I'm going to, give longer timelines. I knew I wanted to kind of like do all of that work in one way or another, and that I needed to work
Yeah.
with somebody else. And then because I kept that vision, one day everything clicked. Like this lawyer that I was telling you about that I worked very closely with, she said, I have a person, he's a refugee, he's done this kind of work, he's a translator, he wants a chance. Would you like to maybe take him on? And I'd never had an employee before. I was committing to like a full-time role, which seemed like a very difficult thing. I said yes. And this time it worked. This time it worked. And he was my first employee. And I had tried so many different times, maybe 10 different arrangements with different people for different reasons. It didn't work, but I didn't lose the vision that I wanted to make it work. And in the end, the
Yeah.
stars aligned. I was ready and it happened. Yeah.
Oh, that's a great example of persistence.
Yes.
Yeah. And in this process here, how do you keep yourself healthy? Self-care and all that because you have a huge amount of workload above your shoulder.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is a very good question. And it's not something that I have fully resolved, but I
Yeah.
will tell you some of the things that I do. First of all, I read this somewhere and it's very good advice. On Sunday, like write up a list of all the things you have to do for the following week. And then next to it, put who's gonna do it.
Okay.
And it doesn't have to be you. It has to be you for some stuff, but you can like delegate a lot more than you think. So I don't, I have a house and everything. I have cleaners, I have people who do a bunch of stuff. I have my assistant who does a bunch of stuff. And this is a process where I'm always trying to see who's going to do it. If someone else can do it,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be you. And secondly, this is very surprising to my friends who know I do a lot of stuff. I don't work in the evenings. I go to sleep at a reasonable time. That is sacred. Like I don't like let my work day spill into the evenings, and if possible, I don't let it spill into the weekends because I know this
Mhm.
is the time that when I leave my office and I drive and I get home, this is my time. I don't respond to emails. I don't do anything else, and
Mhm.
that really does keep me sane. Because if it weren't for that, I think I would myself have a mental health crisis in the
Okay.
for sure.
Oh, that's great advice here, Sylvia. Especially a lot of the cases, files that you handle, they must have some sort of urgency here, including the legal matters.
Yeah, a lot of things have urgency, and then a lot of people are used to working with me. And before I was doing counseling, I was more available to them, so people can also, emotional
Mhm.
pressure of like, please,
Um,
are you sure you can't like interpret at 6 at 7 or whatever.
okay,
So
yeah.
yeah, there is a lot of pressure and a lot of urgency. Like I
Okay.
said, I'm now very lucky that my main person, my assistant, handles a lot of the urgent stuff,
Mhm.
and he organizes everything, and that's lifesaver really. And but even if things are urgent, I think you have to come to the point where you are first.
Yeah.
You're first, and you need to, hard though it may be, you need to kind of have that boundary that if it comes down to it, the world won't end. I think we all saw
Mm.
during COVID that they're like, okay, this is shut down, everything changes, this
Yeah.
cannot go
Mhm.
on, and the world doesn't end. And I think for many of us who feel like we're very responsible people and we want to be very available and everything, it's important to
Mhm.
remember that the world will not end, and that you are first. Because if you're not okay, everything's gonna
Mm.
fall apart anyway.
Oh, yeah. So,
Yeah.
Sylvia, this another question from the audience is, what is the difference between interpretation and translation? Are they the same thing or are they different things technically?
They're very different things. And we at the Society of Translators, this is a question that comes up a lot. And
Yeah.
so translation is everything to do with written documents. So we just do
Mm.
written, and interpretation is like usually live, like we
Mm.
would be interpreting, basically speaking what someone is saying. That's the basic.
Oh, so one is live, one is more like words and.
Yeah, one is
documents?
writing, one is like spoken. Interpretation is
Okay.
the spoken, and translation is working with
And
documents.
you do both.
Yeah, I do both.
Oh, I see. So Sylvia here, when you're doing the interpretation, translations, and now you're adding the counseling skills
Yeah,
together here.
yeah.
Oh, what is the takeaway here? Do you find any overlapping,
Sorry, can you repeat that? Any
anything that
overlapping?
is
Oh,
overlapping that, hey, I've been doing it all along in translation, interpretation, I just didn't realize.
yes, yes. And I think, well, interpretation, when you're preparing cases with lawyers, you're often like a little bit of a mediator. I think an interpreter is a kind of mediator. And sometimes it shouldn't be too much. Like you should be kind of like reflecting what the person is saying. But sometimes there are situations where you find yourself kind of like a little bit, being that in between person, that bridge. And I always used to, when I was
Yeah.
preparing refugee cases, I was sometimes frustrated that the role of the interpreter is so limited, right? Because you're only there to kind of say whatever the lawyer is saying. And,
Yeah.
sometimes you maybe want to give some additional advice or say something or encourage someone in some way. And yeah, and then like with counseling, it's still a limited role, and there's still like you can help people in some ways but not others.
Mhm.
But it's a little bit more like you get to add a little bit more of yourself in
Oh, yeah.
for sure.
So in a way, when you are doing the interpretation here, and you can see those needs that need to be handled by a counselor to
Absolutely,
seek more
absolutely.
further consultation, advice, and coaching.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And again, a lot of the time it comes down to the person might have a lack of information, or they might have a lack
Yeah,
of hope, or they just need someone. Counseling can be as simple
yeah,
as someone to, okay, let's like think about the issues that we're having. And I know it seems like insane and lots of different things, but like, as one,
mm,
two, three, kind of like structuring that in some way so that it feels like something that can be handled. And then I'm very happy
mm,
now with my refugee clients that I have a little bit of a chance to do that kind of work, where with the interpreting
mm,
it wasn't I still managed to do it one way or another. But it
mm.
wasn't really as easy or as much a part of the role.
Okay, yeah. And so, Sylvia, here, let's say somebody have questions about uh, immigrations or refugees here. Typically, the first thing that people think about is, oh, immigration lawyer or consultant, but obviously it's huge cost here. What are some of the channels to get this information where as a newcomers?
Yeah, I think there's quite a bit of information online. And I mentioned earlier, Mosaic is
Mm,
huge here in BC. It's a
okay,
nonprofit
yeah,
organization
okay,
that
yeah.
for
Uh-huh.
newcomers that does a lot of that stuff. Uh,
Mm-hmm,
they
mm-hmm.
can definitely even contact us, especially if they're Spanish
Oh,
speakers.
okay,
And
yeah, okay.
also available for some basic kind of like information. And I think it's important to know that sometimes you can get legal aid. Not everyone knows that, but like depending on if you have a refugee case or whatever, sometimes people are paying lawyers a lot of money or immigration consultants. But depending on
Mm,
the circumstances, you might be able to get
mm,
financing for that legal aid. Same with counseling, right? Like sometimes there is
mm.
funding available. People don't always like know about it, but there are options for sure.
Okay, so as refugees and newcomers, they can seek their legal aid process rather than, I guess, paying out of pocket to hire a lawyer or immigration consultant.
Yeah, so this is particularly for refugees.
Mm,
If someone wants to make a refugee case, I think the first thing they should do is go to legal aid, at least here in BC. I'm not sure
yeah,
if it's the same in other provinces. And they can look at your finances, your situation, your case. And a lot of
mm,
the time, they will be able to provide you with a lawyer for free. So
yeah.
that's definitely worth exploring first before you go down the private route.
Oh yeah, because you also mentioned about looking online. There's some information here, and because of the refugees and newcomer, they're from so many different cultures. In some culture, looking online is not the standard way of doing things. It can be maybe they can look something online. They know the government do things in a different way,
Mhm.
so they have different expectations here, so it can be very confusing for the newcomers.
Yeah, yeah, it can. And I think a lot of especially maybe older people or people who are psychologically in a very bad time of their lives, sometimes they just need to talk to somebody, like either on the phone or in person, and everything else can feel like too much for different reasons. So I think we
Mm,
should also remember that even though we think, okay,
mm.
doing everything online and everything can be done that way and it's simpler, it is, but the human factor is very important, and especially for some populations.
Oh yeah, wow. So there might be a need for, because there's a crisis line, there's a kids helpline, but there might be a newcomers line
Yeah, yeah, they really
for the
should.
future.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. You heard it here first. Newcomers line. Yeah, there
Newcomers line, the AMA, yeah, yeah.
could be.
To have
Mhm.
that human touch here, just to have that undivided attention,
Yeah,
and to have some coaching for the culture and some of the basic things. Yeah,
I think it can make a huge difference. I think we underestimate.
yeah.
I think sometimes this happens also in translation. It's not just the information and that the fact that the
Mhm.
information is conveyed. It's like the human presence, your presence, telling them the information. I think it can make a much bigger difference than most people would guess, for sure.
Oh, yeah, and something that we take for granted. Even which grocery store to buy things, going to a new country, have absolute no idea.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So, Sylvia, today we go through a lot of questions here. We would love to have you back here. But I have a questions. If some of the audience they want to seek more information from you, from Pluma about counseling, translation, interpretation, or just this great business vision and project, how can they
Mhm.
contact you?
Right. So they can get in touch with us through our website that has all the information. So it's plumatranslations.com. They can go there, and there they can find our phone number, some of the stuff that we do, our newsletter, and everything else. Or they can get in touch with me directly. I always say, because I have a very unusual name, Silvia Xalabarde, I'm very easy to find. So that's a good thing about it. And I'm always, whenever I get emails or whatever, I always kind of follow up with people who get in touch with me, and that's the start of many great collaborations as well. So they can get in touch that way.
Okay, and we'll sure to put all these links and emails and contact in the YouTube descriptions here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
So, Sylvia, it is great having you today, and I will talk to you soon.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me.
Bye,
It's been
Sylvia.
great. Bye.